Rita's harsh words reverberated down the laboratory corridor. "You're merely an overcompensated caretaker of glass containers." Her cutting remarks struck me with the force of a physical assault. I remained motionless, clutching my clipboard with increased intensity, observing my supervisor's expression contort with the identical contempt she had displayed toward me for several months. The fluorescent lighting above hummed menacingly, projecting severe shadows on the spotless white corridors of Bright All Medical Center in Memphis, Tennessee. I am Janet Morrison, and at 57 years of age, I had committed my complete professional life to laboratory medicine. Over the last 12 years, I had worked as the certified laboratory director at Bright All, managing all diagnostic testing procedures that maintained this medium-sized clinic's operations. What Rita Henderson, my immediate supervisor, failed to grasp was that my role transcended mere employment. It served as the foundation supporting the entire diagnostic framework. "Rita, you're aware that federal guidelines mandate my particular qualifications for this laboratory to preserve its operational authorization," I stated, maintaining vocal composure despite the anxiety building in my abdomen. "Without a certified laboratory director possessing my credentials, we cannot lawfully conduct any diagnostic examinations." She dismissed my worries with an eye roll and a gesture from her perfectly manicured fingers. "Come now, Janet, any skilled technician could manage your responsibilities. You behave as though you're some irreplaceable mastermind when you merely approve documents throughout the day." My heart dropped as I understood she genuinely accepted her own statements. Rita had received her promotion to operations supervisor 6 months prior, arriving directly from corporate headquarters with an MBA and complete ignorance regarding medical laboratory regulations. She perceived financial opportunities where she should have recognized compliance obligations. My yearly compensation of $120,000 appeared to be in simple target for expense reduction. "The clinical laboratory improvement amendments mandate particular board certifications and ongoing education that I sustain," I clarified, attempting once more to help her comprehend. "My qualifications are connected directly to our laboratory permit. Should I depart, the complete diagnostic operation ceases until a substitute with comparable qualifications can be located and authorized." Rita's laughter was harsh and contemptuous. "You're displaying your usual theatrical behavior. Dr. Patricia Coleman will return from her medical conference next week, and I'm confident she'll value the financial savings I'm executing." She positioned herself against the door frame with crossed arms, already mentally allocating the funds she believed she was conserving. "Accept reality, Janet. Your tenure here is approaching its conclusion." The threatening caution in her voice sent shivers through my body. As I returned to my office, walking past the humming centrifuges and automated analyzers that handled hundreds of patient specimens each day, I couldn't dismiss the sensation that Rita was orchestrating something far more sinister than simply creating workplace difficulties. Her recent scrutiny of my performance, challenging of my choices, and undermining of my credibility with the laboratory personnel indicated that this confrontation marked merely the start of something much more catastrophic. My connection with Bright All Medical Center extended beyond what most individuals recognized. Upon my initial arrival 12 years ago, the clinic was battling laboratory compliance problems, unsuccessful inspections, and a constant turnover of temporary directors who couldn't satisfy the strict federal demands. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the clinic's proprietor and chief executive, had personally recruited me from Kelwind Regional Hospital, where I had successfully converted their laboratory operations from a burden into a revenue generator. "Janet, I require someone who can not only satisfy the regulations but surpass them," Patricia had expressed during my interview. "This clinic serves some of Memphis's most underserved populations, and our patients rely on precise, prompt diagnostic outcomes. Can you assist us in becoming the laboratory that establishes the benchmark for excellence?" Her dedication to patient care had immediately resonated with me. I had spent the prior 8 years observing corporate healthcare eliminate the personal element that made medicine significant. Patricia's vision of a clinic that placed patients before profits seemed like a refreshing change. Within 6 months of joining, we had obtained flawless inspection ratings, broadened our testing abilities, and boosted laboratory income by 40%. The irony was evident that Rita now sought to remove the exact position that had rescued the clinic. She had been employed during Patricia's temporary absence, recruited by the board of directors who were worried about increasing operational expenses. Rita's experience was in corporate reorganization, and she treated healthcare like any other enterprise requiring efficiency improvements. These physicians believe every role is essential, Rita had shared with me during her initial week, unaware she was exposing her basic misunderstanding of medical practice. In the business world, you eliminate excess and enhance profitability. That's how you remain. The most disturbing element of Rita's approach was her total disregard for patient welfare. Our laboratory handled nearly 2,000 patient specimens weekly, delivering essential diagnostic data that informed treatment choices for conditions ranging from diabetes care to cancer identification. The prospect of interrupting this vital service due to budget reductions nauseated me. As I examined the day's quality control outcomes and approved the final group of patient reports, I wondered what would occur if Rita actually executed her threats. The patients depending on our services, the doctors trusting our findings, and the reputation Patricia had labored to establish would all face jeopardy because Rita couldn't see past the figures on a budget document. The crisis arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, precisely 3 days before Patricia's scheduled return from the International Laboratory Medicine Conference in San Diego. I reached work to discover Rita waiting in my office, a manila folder displayed across my desk and a victorious smile spread across her face. "Good morning, Janet," she said with a disgustingly sweet tone. "I trust you enjoyed a lovely weekend because it will be your final one as a Bright All Medical Center employee." My blood froze. "What do you mean?" She indicated the documents on my desk with dramatic flourish. "I've been examining your performance measurements and, honestly, they don't warrant your excessive salary. The board has endorsed my suggestion to reorganize the laboratory operations, and that reorganization excludes your position." I gazed at the termination documents, my hands shaking as I read the effective date. "Today." "Rita, this is impossible. Federal regulations specifically mandate." "I've already consulted with Human Resources," she interrupted, clearly savoring her moment of authority. "Your employment ends immediately. Security will accompany you out after you've collected your personal items." The devastating realization struck me like a physical impact. She was actually proceeding. After months of intimidation and threats, Rita was implementing her scheme to eliminate my position. She genuinely believed she could manage the laboratory without a certified director. "You're mistaken," I said, attempting to suppress the desperation in my voice. "My certifications are directly linked to our laboratory permit. Upon my termination, the automatic cancellation provision in my employment contract activates, and our federal certification becomes void immediately." Rita's smile wavered momentarily before returning with increased smugness. "That's merely intimidation tactics, Janet. Any of our senior technicians can manage the documentation while we locate a less expensive replacement." "This isn't about documentation," I said, accessing the federal database on my computer. "Examine this. Our laboratory license number connects to my National Credentialing Agency certification. When my employment status changes to terminated, the system automatically marks our license as non-compliant." She leaned over my shoulder, examining the screen intently. "That's simply bureaucratic complications. We'll contact them and clarify the circumstances." "There's no clarifying," I said, my voice strengthening as I grasped the severity of what she was about to trigger. "Federal law doesn't provide exceptions for budget cuts or personnel modifications. Without a qualified director, we cannot legally conduct any diagnostic testing. No blood analysis, no urinalysis, no molecular diagnostics, nothing." Rita's confidence began wavering, but her pride prevented retreat. "You're displaying your usual dramatics. The laboratory will operate perfectly without you." As security arrived for my escort out, I glanced back at the laboratory that had served as my professional home for over 10 years. The humming machinery, the committed staff, the thousands of patient specimens that would soon have no processing destination, all destined to become casualties in Rita's misguided cost reduction campaign. The most devastating aspect was knowing Patricia would return to discover her life's achievement in shambles, destroyed by someone who never understood what they were actually managing. The instant I departed Brightall Medical Center for the final time, my phone started buzzing with notifications. The federal database systems were already processing my employment termination, and the automatic alerts cascaded through the regulatory network like digital dominoes toppling in quick succession. I sat in my vehicle in the parking area, observing through the windows as Rita paraded through the laboratory, presumably informing the bewildered staff that operations would proceed normally. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so devastating. Within hours, she would learn that confidence couldn't supersede federal law. My phone rang, showing Wellspring Medical Group's number, Brightall's main competitor across town. Dr. Harrison Blake, their chief executive, was calling directly. "Janet, I just received an automated notification that your credentials have been revoked at Brightall," he said with concern in his voice. "Are you okay? What occurred?" Harrison and I had maintained a professional relationship over the years, frequently collaborating on complex cases requiring specialized testing capabilities. Despite being competitors, we shared mutual respect for laboratory excellence and patient care standards. "Rita Henderson terminated my employment this morning," I explained, feeling the situation's weight settling over me. "She believes any technician can replace me and doesn't understand the regulatory requirements." There was an extended pause before Harrison spoke again. "Janet, this is catastrophic for them. Without your certifications, they can't perform any diagnostic testing. Are you telling me Rita doesn't understand that she just shut down their entire laboratory operation?" "That's precisely what I'm telling you," I replied, watching confused technicians gathering at the laboratory windows, probably wondering why their computer systems displayed error messages. "She thinks this is just administrative paperwork that can be resolved with a phone call." Harrison's next words completely caught me off guard. "Janet, I've been hoping for an opportunity to expand our laboratory operations, and frankly, I've always believed you were underutilized at Brightall. What would you say to joining Wellspring as our Director of Laboratory Operations? The position includes equity participation and a substantial salary increase." I felt my breath catch. "Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but I just lost my job this morning. Are you certain this is the appropriate time for such a discussion?" "This is precisely the right time," he said firmly. "Brightall is about to lose every single laboratory patient when word spreads that they can't perform testing. Those patients will need somewhere to go, and I want Wellspring to be ready to serve them with the highest quality laboratory services available. Under your leadership, we could become Memphis's premier diagnostic center." As we conversed, I watched Rita emerge from the building. Her face no longer triumphant but confused and increasingly panicked. She was holding her phone to her ear, presumably handling the first wave of system alerts and regulatory notifications. "The timing is certainly interesting," I admitted, feeling a spark of something I hadn't experienced in months, hope mixed with a delicious anticipation of poetic justice. "What kind of timeline are you considering?" "I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning," Harrison said. "Our board has already approved the expansion budget, and frankly, acquiring Brightall's patient base would accelerate our growth timeline by at least 2 years." The perfect symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me. Rita had eliminated my position to save money, only to hand our entire patient base to the competition along with their most qualified laboratory director. The financial impact would be devastating, not just the immediate loss of laboratory revenue, but the long-term damage to Brightall's reputation and patient relationships. "Harrison, I'm very interested in discussing this opportunity," I said, watching as more Brightall staff members gathered in the parking lot, clearly dealing with some kind of crisis inside the building. "When can we meet? How about this afternoon? I have a feeling your former employer is about to have a very difficult day, and I'd like to be prepared to help those displaced patients as quickly as possible." As I drove away from Brightall, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Rita's attempt to eliminate what she saw as unnecessary expense was about to become the most costly mistake in the clinic's history. By 2 p.m. that same day, the full scope of Rita's catastrophic decision was becoming clear throughout Memphis's medical community. I was sitting in Harrison's executive conference room at Wellspring Medical Group, reviewing the generous offer package he had prepared, when his assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Blake, I apologize for interrupting, but we're receiving calls from several physician offices asking about emergency laboratory services," she said. "Apparently, Bright All Medical Center has suspended all diagnostic testing indefinitely." Harrison and I exchanged knowing glances. The news was spreading faster than we had anticipated, which meant the regulatory agencies had wasted no time in notifying healthcare providers about Bright All's non-compliance status. "How many calls?" Harrison asked. 17 in the past hour, she replied. "And Dr. Morrison, there are several messages specifically asking for you by name. Word is getting out that you're no longer with Bright All." The validation felt bittersweet. These were physicians who trusted my work, who had relied on the quality and accuracy of our laboratory results to guide their patient care decisions. Now, they were scrambling to find alternative testing facilities because Rita had dismissed my warnings as job protection tactics. My phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Sarah Chen, one of Bright All's primary referring physicians. "Janet, heard about the lab closure. Can you recommend alternative testing facilities? My diabetic patients need their monitoring results ASAP." Then another from Dr. Michael Torres. "What's happening at Bright All? Our morning lab orders are all being rejected by the system." "Harrison, I need to accept your offer," I said, setting my phone aside. "These patients can't wait for Bright All to figure out their regulatory nightmare." "I was hoping you'd say that," Harrison replied, sliding the contract across the table. "With your reputation and relationships, we can have these physicians transferring their laboratory orders to Wellspring by tomorrow morning." As I signed the agreement that would make me Wellspring's Director of Laboratory Operations with a 30% salary increase and equity participation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Coleman's number. She was calling from San Diego. "Janet, please tell me what I'm hearing isn't true." Patricia's voice was strained with panic. "I just received a call from our attorney saying we've lost our laboratory certification." "What happened?" "Rita terminated my employment this morning," I explained calmly. I warned her repeatedly about the regulatory requirements, but she believed any technician could replace me. "Oh my God," Patricia whispered. "Where is she now? I need to speak with her immediately." "I'm not sure, but based on the physician calls we're receiving, I suspect she's dealing with a lot of very angry doctors and confused patients." "Janet, we need to fix this. Can you come back? Name your price. Whatever it takes to restore our certification." The desperation in Patricia's voice was heartbreaking, but the damage was already done. "Patricia, I've already accepted a position with Wellspring Medical Group. Even if I wanted to return, the certification process would take weeks, and you'd need board approval for the salary it would require to make that worthwhile." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Patricia was beginning to understand that Rita's decision hadn't just cost them my services. It had potentially destroyed everything she had built over the past 15 years. "I'm so sorry, Janet," she finally said. "You deserved better than this." As I hung up, Harrison was already making calls to expand our laboratory's operating hours and bring in additional staff to handle the influx of patients we were about to receive. The next morning, I arrived at Wellspring Medical Group at 6 a.m. to find the parking lot already bustling with activity. News of Bright All's laboratory closure had spread throughout Memphis's medical community overnight, and physicians were scrambling to establish new testing relationships for their patients. Harrison met me at the entrance, his face flushed with excitement. "Janet, we've received over 200 laboratory order transfers since yesterday afternoon. Our phone hasn't stopped ringing." As we walked through Wellspring's expanded laboratory facility, I could see the staff preparing for what was clearly going to be the busiest day in the clinic's history. The contrast with my last day at Bright All couldn't have been more stark. Instead of confusion and panic, there was organized efficiency and professional excitement. Dr. Morrison, called out Lisa Chen, one of Wellspring's senior laboratory technicians. We're so honored to have you join our team. The physicians have been asking specifically for your oversight on their complex cases. The warmth of the welcome was overwhelming after months of Rita's hostility and disrespect. These professionals understood and valued laboratory expertise, and they were genuinely excited about the expansion opportunities my arrival represented. My phone had been buzzing constantly since sunrise with messages from physician offices, former Brightall colleagues, and even some of the more experienced technicians asking about employment opportunities at Wellspring. The exodus from Brightall was happening faster than anyone had anticipated. At 9 a.m., Harrison's assistant brought me a particularly interesting message. Dr. Morrison, I have Rita Henderson on line 2. She says it's urgent and concerns regulatory compliance. I looked at Harrison, who nodded encouragingly. Take it. I'm curious to hear what she has to say. Janet, thank God you answered. Rita's voice was completely different from yesterday's smugness. Now she sounded desperate and exhausted. I need your help. The federal agencies are saying we can't reopen the laboratory without a certified director, and the replacement candidates are saying it could take 6 to 8 weeks to complete the credentialing process. I appreciate the offer, but I've already committed to Wellspring Medical Group, I said, watching as another batch of laboratory orders arrived from former Brightall physicians. Even if I were interested, the damage to your certification status would require starting the entire approval process from scratch. You're saying there's no way to fix this quickly? Rita's voice was barely a whisper now. The regulations don't have emergency provisions for staffing decisions, I explained. You eliminated a federally required position, and there are consequences for that choice. After hanging up, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was certainly satisfaction in seeing Rita face the consequences of her arrogance, but I also felt genuine sadness for Patricia and the innocent staff members who were suffering because of one person's poor judgment. How did that go? Harrison asked, appearing with a cup of coffee and a wide smile. About as well as expected, I replied. Rita is beginning to understand that federal regulations don't bend for budget concerns. Well, their loss is definitely our gain, Harrison said. We're already ahead of our annual growth projections, and it's only been 24 hours. As I settled into my new office and began reviewing the day's quality control procedures, I couldn't help but appreciate the perfect irony of the situation. Rita's attempt to save money by eliminating my position had instead created the perfect storm that launched my career to new heights while potentially destroying everything she had tried to protect. 3 days later, Patricia Coleman returned from San Diego to find her medical practice in complete chaos. The scene that greeted her would have been comical if the consequences weren't so devastating for everyone involved. I learned the details from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, one of Brightall's primary care physicians, who had decided to establish her laboratory relationship with Wellspring. She called me that Thursday afternoon, still shaking her head in disbelief at what she had witnessed. Janet, you should have seen Patricia's face when she walked into the laboratory, Jennifer said. The entire diagnostic operation was shut down. No testing, no results, no revenue. Rita was standing there with a stack of regulatory violation notices, trying to explain why she thought firing you was a good idea. The confrontation had been swift and brutal. Patricia, normally composed and diplomatic, had apparently unleashed months of frustration on Rita in front of the entire laboratory staff. "What have you done, you fool?" Patricia had shouted, her voice echoing through the empty laboratory. "Do you have any idea what you've just destroyed?" Rita, according to Jennifer, had tried to defend her decision by pointing to the potential salary savings, but Patricia cut her off with devastating precision. "You eliminated the one person whose credentials kept us operational to save money." Patricia's voice had grown dangerously quiet. "That person whose salary you thought was too high. She was generating over $2 million in annual laboratory revenue. The financial reality was stark and undeniable. My position cost the clinic $120,000 annually in salary and benefits, but the laboratory operations I oversaw generated nearly 17% of Brightall's total revenue. Rita had eliminated a position that paid for itself more than 16 times over. Jennifer told me Rita actually tried to argue that they could hire a replacement quickly. I shared with Harrison as we reviewed Wellspring's dramatically improved quarterly projections. Patricia apparently laughed, the bitter kind of laugh, and told her that the credentialing process alone would take 2 months, assuming they could find someone willing to join a clinic that had just demonstrated such spectacular regulatory incompetence. The immediate closure of Brightall's laboratory had created a domino effect that went far beyond lost revenue. Patient relationships that had taken years to build were severed overnight. Referring physicians, unable to trust a clinic that couldn't maintain basic operational compliance, were transferring their patients to other facilities. Insurance companies were demanding explanations for the sudden cessation of diagnostic services. By the end of October, just 2 weeks after my termination, the full scope of Rita's catastrophic decision had become clear throughout Memphis's medical community. Brightall Medical Center, once a respected mid-sized clinic serving over 8,000 patients, was facing potential closure. Patricia had called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis, and according to the rumors circulating through the medical community, she had presented them with 2 equally devastating options: pay massive federal fines for operating without proper certification, or permanently shutter the laboratory and lose nearly 20% of the clinic's revenue base. Meanwhile, Wellspring Medical Group was experiencing unprecedented growth. Under my leadership, we had expanded our laboratory operations to handle the influx of former Brightall patients, hired 3 additional technicians, and established relationships with 12 new referring physicians. "Janet, the October numbers are extraordinary," Harrison announced during our weekly management meeting. "We've increased laboratory revenue by 68% compared to last month, and patient satisfaction scores are at an all-time high." The success felt surreal after months of Rita's constant criticism and undermining. Here my expertise was valued and my decisions were respected. The laboratory staff looked to me for guidance rather than questioning my every move, and physicians called personally to express their appreciation for the quality of our diagnostic services. Rita, meanwhile, had become a pariah in Memphis's medical community. Word of her regulatory disaster had spread quickly, and her reputation for cost-cutting over compliance had made her unemployable at any serious healthcare facility. Patricia had terminated her employment within days of returning from San Diego, but the damage was irreversible. The most satisfying aspect of the entire situation was knowing that the patients were receiving better care. Wellspring's larger facility, more advanced equipment, and expanded testing capabilities meant that former Brightall patients were actually benefiting from Rita's short-sighted decision. Even as the clinic that had abandoned them faced potential bankruptcy, the patients' needs were being met with superior service and expertise. Rita Henderson's attempts to cut costs through regulatory ignorance ultimately cost Brightall Medical Center over $3 million in lost revenue and forced the clinic into bankruptcy proceedings within 6 months. She never found another position in healthcare management. Her reputation permanently destroyed by the most expensive personnel decision in Memphis medical history. Patricia Coleman, despite her efforts to salvage the practice, was forced to sell the remaining assets to cover federal fines and patient compensation claims. As I stood in my corner office at Wellspring Medical Group, reviewing our year-end reports that showed record-breaking growth and patient satisfaction, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Rita's arrogance and ignorance had inadvertently launched me into the most successful phase of my career, proving that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply allowing incompetent people to face the full consequences of their own poor decisions.